halfway through, as I said just a moment ago, and we'll just look at it in an overview, and then in discussion we can sort of tease out other issues and questions. And as this interlude between the sounding of the sixth and the sounding of the seventh trumpet continues, so we probably come to the most complex chapter so far. Difficult to try and understand not just the meaning of John's vision, but also what it says to us today. And this complexity of chapter 11 is multi-layered. The first thing that we notice is that there are so many allusions to the Old Testament. We see references including sort of a drawing upon Zechariah, Daniel, Exodus, Kings, Ezekiel. We see allusions to the New Testament. We also, the complexity is also there because there's a clear link forwards here to chapters 12 and 13. We see reference to the beast, that's to come. We see this repeating reference of time, 1,260 days, 42 months. And then later on, we'll see this times time and half a time, 3.5 years. Here we see 3.5 days. So we see this complexity of time woven in with, or begins here in this chapter 2. And also then, a third layer, as it were, we're introduced to two new characters for whom we need to try and understand their symbolism, who they are and what it is they do. And so a very quick overview. John, we see, is given a measuring line, and he is told, as we see in both Ezekiel and Zechariah, to measure the temple. What we see in the Old Testament prophets is that it's the angel who measures the temple, but here John is told to measure. Many would suggest this is not the physical building. That has a whole raft of implications upon the date. So if it's post AD 70, the temple physically is not standing. It's been destroyed. Some would then suggest it's looking forward to the spiritual temple, the people of God. But then we ask the question, well, is this the great multitude from chapter 7? We don't know. Why is the outer court and the Gentiles, why are they excluded if they're included in this great multitude? So it raises lots of sort of questions that are difficult to answer. And we see also in Matthew 24, as Jesus with the disciples, as they look at the temple, and Jesus talks about what we often call the end times, he uses very similar language there. So it's possible here that as John writes this vision, that he's using the term the Gentiles who are going to trample the temple as that sort of general term to refer to those who were anti-God, just as originally the term Gentile would have meant within a Jewish society. And so maybe there's something of that here. And then we see that there's this limit of time where they will war against God's people. And then we're introduced to these two witnesses. They sort of appear, and some commentators suggest that there's an essence here. Their testimony is true. The Old Testament and the Jewish law was, for any testimony to be considered true, you needed 2 or more witnesses. And so these 2 witnesses symbolically speak the truth. And they're going to prophesy for the same period that the Gentiles are going to trample the temple, 42 months or 1,260 days. And then we have this, these are the olive tree and the lampstands. Again, this is back to Daniel and Ezekiel. They stand in the presence of God, so therefore they have the authority of God. They're able to offer the protection of God. And yet, paradoxically, they're going to be killed by the beast, who's going to appear in chapter 13. And so what we see is these 2 witnesses, like the saints who were under the throne, will be martyred. And those who strike them down will think that they have won. And we see echoes to Christ's own crucifixion. People will celebrate. The church has been defeated. Messiah can no longer threaten to rule over us, as it were, or long to or want to. We've no longer to submit to him, all of those things. We can rule over ourselves. But John says to these scattered churches across Asia, to God's people, this might look and feel like it's happening. Persecuted by Rome, martyred in the games, excluded from society, etc., etc., it might well feel like the church is being trampled on, that the voice of Messiah is being silenced, that truth has been lost. But John says this will not be the case. And we see that these two figures are raised to life. Truth remains. And then the seventh trumpet sounds, and there is great rejoicing. God is sovereign. His promise is sure. And as the vision enters the final throes of its message of suffering and persecution, the trampling of the church, and before we glimpse the New Jerusalem, so we see the final throes of the vision coming in chapter 12 and 13, and then as we enter into chapter 14, we start to move towards our sort of horizon is turned towards the New Jerusalem. Then surely this is what we need to be reminded of, and this is what the Christians in Asia needed to hear. It might feel like all is lost. You might be suffering, but the time is limited. God's promise is sure. And we look forward to the New Jerusalem. And we see echoes of that in the likes of Hebrews as well. So that's a very quick overview, and I'll stop there.